Hello again. My name is Julie, Customer Success Manager for mTuitive. Welcome to session 2 of our 2021 virtual event. We really thank you for being here. And next up is mTuitive's Lilli Everson, who will review our in-depth validation process for adopting updates and new templates into synoptic reporting solutions. She will be joined by Eric Daley of the College of American Pathologists and Dr. Wayne Duke of Baystate Health. And please stay tuned at the end for a special message from mTuitive CEO, Colin Murphy. And with that, I will turn it over to Lilli.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Julie, for that introduction. As Julie said, my name is Lilli Everson. I just wanted to introduce the session and let you know what our agenda is for today. I am very, very honored to be able to represent today the hardworking group at mTuitive, who brings you regular CAP content updates and tests, validates, and authors all of that content for our customers. So today, we are going to go through the CAP's release and quality management process with Eric Daley. Then we are going to bring it back to me to talk about mTuitive's validation and testing process. And then finally, we'll hear from Dr. Duke, who will describe a real-life use case of using mTuitive's products. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Eric Daley, and Eric will discuss the CAP's authoring and quality management workflow. Their single source product tool provides the entire framework for this process and allows them to track changes to the eCCs. So to talk about all of this, I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Thank you, Lilli, for that great introduction. So hi, everyone. I am Eric Daley. I'm here to explain the CAP Cancer Protocol and Electronic Cancer Checklist release workflow, and more importantly, give a high-level overview of the quality management process that goes behind the scenes in releasing them. I'm going to provide an overview of the single source product, how it interacts with our project tracker tool, and finally, I'm going to give a high-level overview of the quality management workflow for the Cancer Protocol release process. I say high level because I only have 10 minutes, so I'd better pick up my pace. To understand the quality management for the release, it is important to understand how we create our cancer protocols and eCC templates. As much of our QA efforts are built on the single source product workflow. So that being said, here is the single source product, otherwise known as SSP. It is an authoring tool used to create both the paper protocols and the eCC templates. It has a fairly simple user interface. On the left-hand side, we have our content tree for any given protocol. In the middle, we have the metadata associated to the selected item in the content tree. And on the right, we have the expected output. The SSP process has a specific workflow. You have an author draft where the authors can enter their changes and push it through to reviewers. Then you have a modeler phase where the modelers can make adjustments. Then you have a publication candidate where the protocol becomes locked for content. And finally, you have a publication of the cancer protocol and eCC templates. Our project tracker tool is used to organize issue intake, issue management, new content, and updated content such as changes to the AJCC staging or WHO updates to histologic types. The image here depicts our UTrack software used to create our project tracker tool. Project trackers are built for each specific issue, as I'm demonstrating here with an adrenal gland PT from the last release. You can see it as PT19 along with some specific attachments related to the issue. In SSP, we track all the PTs back to our comments with hyperlinks, which are really glorified breadcrumbs tracking all the changes back to a specific PT. This allows us to roadmap our release through our project tracker. This is why our SSP tool is so important as we map our SSP change management from the SSP process. You have open, triage, in progress, modeling, QC, publication candidate, and complete. These are just high-level states for the change management process. As you can see in the image to the right, we break down these states much further. All these steps in our change management map back to specific workflow milestones in the SSP tool itself. Like I mentioned earlier, we use our PT to roadmap our release, as you can see here in this dashboard review, showing all the issues and the state in the release process to where that specific protocol is. These two additional dashboards represent the issue type to protocols affected and the specific metadata errors to protocols affected. In our quality management process, we do utilize our partnership with mTuitive and put up modeling into our CAP eForm testbed. We use this testbed to do our demonstrations and presentations to our House of Delegates for reviews of significant changes in the protocols. For example, the last June release, we had 5 HOD reviews where our expert authors demonstrated the modeling by entering a case into the CAP eForm testbed while on a webinar with our HOD members, allowing for more interactive demonstrations. Our XML review allows us to review the PT and SSP changes and ensures that they are in the XML. Remembering that the SSP tool produces the XML directly from the SSP database. So any changes in SSP must be represented in our XML. As you can see here with the PT19 that called for a change to the report text, that change now is transitioned in the XML on the right. Our HTML is a transformation of the XML. So any changes in the PT or an SSP will also be reflected in the HTML as well. Now that we've confirmed the validity of the eCC files, we must review the cancer protocol paper changes as well. Again, we must ensure that changes from the PT and SSP are present. In this step, we also visit formatting of the paper and make adjustments and tweaks to the SSP output so that they are easily followed by our customers. The XML comparator is a CAP licensed tool that allows us to review previous versions of the XML to the updated XML and flags all the specific changes from version to version. We use this tool to ensure that we see the changes specific to each template. Our licensed eCC users also have access to this tool, and many of our vendors and end users use this tool in their own validations of the eCC templates. Finally, we compare the eCC templates to the cancer protocols and ensure all changes are present, and if so, we move the protocols and templates into the publication candidate phase. Up to this point in the QA process, there has also been many simultaneously running manual SQL queries. These queries look for specific trends and patterns in the modeling. At this point in the process, all those other efforts in QC are reported and the database becomes locked. In the end, the EC templates are published and distributed to our licensed users. The cancer protocols get posted to the CAP Cancer Protocol webpage. And new to this year, we also post the HTML views of the cancer protocols to the My CAP CAP app. If anyone is interested in more detailed review, or if you have any questions regarding the QA process, please feel free to email me at the CAP@cap.org. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you so much for being here. So now I'm going to share my screen. So now I'm really excited to talk to you all about mTuitive's validation and testing process. Quick housekeeping note first, if you are joining us from Canada, you may know our product that deals with pathology synoptic reporting as Expert. If you are from the United States, you may know our product as CAP eForm. For all intents and purposes, they are the same product. So in this session, I'm going to be referring to it as eForm, but if you know it as Expert, it is the same product. So let's start with, why do we test? Our testing process is critical to mTuitive's mission because, of course, one of our main goals, if not our main goal, is to improve patient care and outcomes by reducing the errors made in pathology reports. And we can only do this if we ourselves avoid errors. So, through our rigorous testing process and our partnership with the CAP, mTuitive actually ends up improving the eCCs, and in doing so, improves the accuracy of eCC-based reports for better patient care and outcomes. Lastly, I just want to point out that we are the only vendor who provides this level of quality assurance and value-added content. And by value-added content, what I mean is all of those alerts, the automatic calculations, the conditional branching, certain properties that affect report output, all of those things that you know and love about the mTuitive product. So there are three main sort of categories of error finding in our testing process. First, we help our partners like the CAP find any errors in their content. Secondly, we find and eliminate errors in our own content before we release it to customers. And third, we locate potential scenarios for user error and prevent them from ever happening in the first place. So this entire process ends up taking, for a major CAP eCC release, over 2,000 hours. And this is with a team of experts who does this year after year, and large parts of our test process now being automated, which I will also show you. So I just want to touch on preview really quickly. Preview is what we refer to as what Eric called the CAP eForm test bed. And so that is when, as Eric said, the CAP ends up sending us over some checklists before the release comes out to vendors, and we will put it into our authoring tool. We will put it into our actual product, and that way both the CAP and mTuitive can look at how these checklists are going to appear in the actual product and make sure that everything is usable, that there's no errors or mistakes, and that the authors and everybody involved like the output that they see in the product. And so knowledge engineers are actually able to catch some issues during the checklist preview before the eCCs are even released to vendors at large. So that iterative feedback from mTuitive actually helps make the eCCs better before that release. So now I want to get into the important authoring stage. That is when the CAP has released the checklists to vendors and customers alike. And at this point, we actually have, thanks to our brilliant developers, an automated import tool that takes that XML of the eCCs, and on the left, you will see an HTML representation of the checklist that you also saw in Eric's slides. They will take the XML and they will import it into, as you see on the right, our authoring tool that is proprietary to mTuitive. And so that allows us to automatically add everything from the eCCs into our authoring tool so that we can focus on that value-added content I was talking about earlier. This is where our knowledge engineers add any alerts, any automatic calculations, make sure that any other sort of availability rules and conditional branching are good. Also making sure that we add any properties we need to influence the report output so that it looks the way that you all come to expect. So once the knowledge engineers have signaled that the authoring process is done, we get into the actual testing stage. So there's three main stages of the testing: functional testing, calculation testing, and subject matter expert review. And I'm going to go into each of those in a little more depth. So first of all, functional testing is essentially just testing from the perspective of the user. So our functional testers actually open up the same product that you use, they open up eForm, and they open up the checklist, and they go through it like a user would go through it. And the reason this is so important is that it's not just catching errors, but also working on how to improve usability for pathologists, and also finding areas where we might be able to add more alerts to catch user error. So they could look through and say, hey, like this doesn't really flow very well, or maybe there's another way that the user could do this that would involve less clicks. And if we are able to improve that while, of course, still keeping you all CAP compliant, we will try and make the checklist more usable on top of making sure that everything is accurate. Another really important point is that functional testers cross-check each other's work. And so instead of just having one functional tester look through a checklist, we'll make sure that after the first functional tester is done, that another functional tester will come in and also look at that same checklist to make sure that the first tester didn't miss anything, because we are all human and sometimes something may slip through. So that is just an extra safety net to make sure that we catch any errors. Here I wanted to show you a non-exhaustive list of functional testing steps. So this has a lot of mTuitive jargon in it, and most of them may not make sense to the average viewer, but what I wanted to demonstrate here is that we have a very long and very specific procedure list to go through with every single checklist to make sure that certain properties, certain outputs, for example, how the report looks when you preview it or when you submit it, making sure that, you know, if the CIP says that it should be a multi-select or a single select, or that selecting a certain answer should deselect all the other answers, that we are adhering to that, making sure that if we allow you to enter in free text, that the type of text that we are allowing you to enter is correct, for example, a number versus a string, and just making sure that there's no spelling errors, that all of the required elements are actually required in the checklist. So I also just wanted to show you this real life example really quick from over this past summer. So this is an errata email that many of you may have received from the CAP alerting everybody that under the PM category, there was no option to select PM1. And this was something that one of our functional testers, Bob Gilbert, actually found and alerted both our team and the CAP immediately. And much to the CAP's credit, they immediately turned around and put out this updated checklist. And so we're just really proud of the impact that we have at mTuitive on patient care and making sure that these checklists are accurate and correct. So now I'd like to get into calculation testing. And what I mean by calculation testing is that users will know that certain fields in the checklist will automatically calculate depending on your answers. So generally speaking, that is PT and PN categories, the risk assessment for GIST, the Nottingham score for breast, and the FIGO for gynecological checklists. So when we have those automatic staging calculations, every discrete combination of answers to calculation or staging relevant questions needs to be tested. And what I mean by that are questions that directly impact that calculation, whether it's staging or Nottingham score or whatever it may be. So for example, for PT, a very common staging relevant question would be tumor size, or tumor extent, or direct invasion of tumor, or something along those lines. But it varies depending on the checklist and its AJCC, PTNM staging criteria, so it's really individual to each checklist. So there's a lot to keep track of. And to track this, we use what we call a testing matrix. A testing matrix is really just a spreadsheet that contains every combination of answers that we need to test. So here's an example. This is the colon and rectum resection checklist for PT. This isn't the entire spreadsheet. It's just a sampling of it. And it's sort of a lot to look at, but I'm going to break it down piece by piece and show you how we track our staging calculations. So first, I'd like you to focus on column A that I've outlined here. You'll see at the top, there is a cell that says set. That is essentially the instruction that we are giving. So in this case, we're saying set. Underneath, we have a question, which is tumor extent, and before it will be the path, so you can see exactly where it is in that hierarchy tree. So in this case, we're saying set tumor extent, and then below, you'll see all of the possible answers. So we have no evidence of primary tumor, no invasion, etc. So essentially, we have question and answers in each column until you get to this column in column C that says test. Now, test is a different instruction. Test is saying that we are checking the below question to make sure that it calculates to the answers below. So now I'd like you to focus on the rows. Let's just focus on row 4. Each row that you see in a spreadsheet can be considered like a single test. And so in this case, and these are real combinations of answers that users could put in. So for tumor extent, we're saying no evidence of primary tumor. For macroscopic tumor perforation, we're saying it's not identified. And then under PT category, we are saying that it should be PT0. But how do we make sure that it is actually calculating to PT0? We used to do this process manually, but again, our brilliant developers stepped in and developed a tool that actually reads these spreadsheets and runs the tests in the actual eForm program for us. So this is a screenshot of that program. And essentially all we do is we put in the spreadsheet and we let it run. It will validate it against our database to make sure that all the questions and answers we put in are real and valid questions and answers. And then it will run each of those tests. So if you look back at this slide, it will run test 4, record the answer. Does it match what we have in the test column? Is it a PT0? If it is, it's a success. If it calculates to something else, then it's a fail. And it does that for every single row, which is incredibly important because we can get up into maybe 7,000 tests that we have to run per checklist. So if it does fail, you'll see back here there will be a yellow error message in the log just telling you that not everything passed. There were ones that failed, and it'll give you specific information. But an even easier view to look at it is by opening up that spreadsheet again. And you'll see in this example of the small intestine, there was one error. You can see in column D, the red cell indicates that that row failed. We were expecting a PT4. That is confirmed in column E, which says expected but not found PT4. And then in column F, we have not expected but found, which is what the test runner actually found when it ran the test. So in this case, we were expecting PT4, but it actually calculated to PT not assigned in the real world. So we take this fail, we bring it back to the knowledge engineers, and our knowledge engineers help fix the calculation so that everything passes. So I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, where do these expected stages come from? They come from expert review. So we call them subject matter experts, and they're people who actually work in the field of pathology, who have the expertise to be able to determine what the stage should be for each calculation. So we have one in-house subject matter expert who works with us, Daniel Fossey, who many of you have seen earlier today. And we also work with subject matter experts outside of mTuitive as well, including CAP protocol authors and even some of our own users to make sure that all of our calculations are correct. So every row retest, even in the thousands, is personally checked by a subject matter expert. That's really important because, we want to make sure that every single time we are recommending a stage, that we are recommending something that is reviewed and that is correct. The other important part of the subject matter expert review is not just validating the output, but also the input. So do our calculations and our test matrices include everything that should impact staging? For example, maybe in the matrix or even in our calculations, we could have been missing a question. So our subject matter experts will actually go back to the eCC, and oftentimes we will use the XML comparator tool that Eric showed and make sure that there isn't anything missing by comparing that to the actual checklist and expert and making sure that there's nothing missing from the calculation. Lastly, I just wanted to say that our staging calculations are different from machine learning, those black box scenarios, because we personally validate both the input, the algorithms or functions that process that input, and the output. We, as humans, see and determine every step of the process. So one question that we get a lot from our customers is why they entered in a certain combination of answers and eForm didn't give them a stage, maybe for PT or PN. Some people have asked, is this a bug? And actually, no, it is not a bug. It is by design. We only stage when we are completely confident of the answer. If there's any ambiguity, we do not stage. And that is really important to us. So in a situation where eForm does not stage, the user will need to override the automatic staging and select the stage themselves, which you can always do even if eForm does calculate a stage. But if it doesn't, then in order to answer the question, you will absolutely need to see where I have this orange arrow, click on the override automatic calculation box, and select the appropriate stage. And this is another important thing to do because it gives the pathologist a chance to stop, look over their answers. Maybe they accidentally, they misclicked on their keyboard and selected something that they didn't mean to select. And so if we can try and catch some of those and not stage in situations where things seem a little bit unclear, that's just another stop in the process to make sure the errors aren't being made. So here are some specific scenarios that cause us not to stage. First off, lack of information in the CAP checklist required for staging. So as many of you know, certain staging criteria is very much based on clinical information. For example, I think the lip and oral cavity PT is one such category where that is true. And so if the CAP checklist itself isn't collecting that data, we can't really stage. Second of all, the subject matter expert may determine that the answers to two different questions that are relevant to staging and that we are testing conflict with each other. So, they answered something for question A and they answered something for question B, and those two answers just don't seem to make sense in a real world use case. Maybe, again, there was some sort of misclick. So this is an opportunity for them to go back and review what they selected. Lastly, in most questions, the CAP will sort of give you an out. For example, other, cannot be determined, not applicable. And particularly when you're saying something like other, we don't really know what you mean by that. And so, for example, there may be like a free text field after other, but you can enter anything in there. And so rather than try and guess what you mean by that, we're just going to not stage and allow the user to override and select the appropriate stage. So after that, and we have regular biweekly meetings to check the status with everybody and make sure that there's nothing that is inhibiting the progress of the project. We have one final meeting at the end where everybody on the team signs off and says, we believe in the work that we did. It is up to the quality that we expect it to be. We don't have any concerns about the work, and now we're ready to deploy to customers. So to close, I would like to emphasize that the most important reason we do this process is so our customers don't have to worry about doing it themselves. Those 2,000 hours per release that I mentioned, we do that work so that you don't have to. And that means that you can focus on providing excellent patient care. So you have heard from the perspective of the CAP, you have heard from mTuitive, and now there's one final perspective I would like to share with you today. And that is a physician and mTuitive user, much like many of you. So now we are going to hear from Dr. Duke, who will talk to us about why Baystate Health chose mTuitive and how they worked with us to improve their pathology reports for their intended recipients. So, Dr. Duke, if you would, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Lilli. Now always the tricky part to share the screen. So, hello, my name is Wayne Duke. I work at Baystate Health. I can't say that I'm a big fan of Monty Python, but I put this slide out here to say we're going to be talking about something different for the next 10 minutes. And I do want to say that I have to leave at 3 o'clock for another meeting, so I will be brief. This slide is to illustrate that we're not going to be talking about software or programming or testing for the next few minutes, but we're going to be talking about patient care, at least how to deliver high-quality reports, specifically from the pathologist perspective. So something a bit different. So I work at Baystate Health. Here we have 16 anatomic pathologists, and we examine about 45,000 surgical pathology specimens a year. So I became involved with electronic cancer reporting about 5 years ago, specifically because of the CAP accreditation requirement that our cancer reports contain what was deemed required elements. And when we were performing self-audits, we realized that we were not meeting that standard. This was a very best-selling book from the 1970s. The premise behind this book was that too much information in the future was going to be coming to people in too little of time. And that's basically the position that we felt we were in, and I think that pathologists overall feel that they're in. You know, the AJCC is updating their protocols, and the CAP is updating their protocols all the time. And it's just really difficult to sort of stay ahead of the curve. So we found ourselves, as I think many pathologists do, in a state of a shock, or I guess a future shock, as was predicted by Alvin Toffler back in the 1970s. So a few years ago, we explored the electronic cancer reporting options, and at least for our institution, there were two choices. There was to use a product called Cerner CoPath Plus and to use the mTuitive software. Ultimately, we chose the mTuitive software for two reasons. We chose it because of the ability to modify report elements, and equally, if not more important, to create a comprehensive report rather than just a synoptic report. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in the next few slides. What do I mean by comprehensive versus a synoptic report? So let's just talk for a moment about perspective. So earlier we heard the perspective from the CAP, and we heard a perspective from mTuitive about the software. But ultimately, for a pathologist, we need to create reports that are easily readable and understandable to the surgeons, to the oncologists, and to the radiation oncologists, because ultimately they're the ones that are serving the patients. So that's really where my perspective is coming from. How can we most effectively communicate what we need to these physicians that are taking care of our patients? So these are cartoons, but I want to explain what I mean by synoptic versus comprehensive report. In a synoptic report, which is what most institutions do, they list all of these parts separately, and then somewhere they say, see synoptic report. Then you have to turn or scroll to page 2 or page 3 to get to the good stuff, that is the actual data that's important about the cancer. Rather, here at Baystate, what we've done is we've created a more comprehensive report front and center. So the report on the side is an example of one of our reports where the good stuff, so to speak, all of the data about the cancer is immediately up front, and it includes actually all of the parts. Here's how I see the difference. In the typical synoptic report, which is what most institutions are doing, all of the parts are reported separately. In the reports that we were able to create working with mTuitive, all of the parts are reported together. In a synoptic report, the cancer is reported on page 2 or page 3 under a section called synoptic. In our reports, the cancer diagnosis and the data is right up front at the beginning. Also, there's a risk of transposition or transcription errors between the separate parts reported and the synoptic report. Since we create a comprehensive report, there's no danger of this transposition transcription. What I mean is this, if we go back, here in these different parts, the data is not integrated into the full cancer report. So there can be an error here that's positive or negative, but it's not incorporated automatically into a comprehensive report. Hence, the pathologist has to amend the report, and pathologists hate to amend reports. So by creating a comprehensive report where all of the data is merely in one field, there's no risk of this transposition or transcription error. So I want to just show a couple of examples of what we've created with mTuitive, what I call our comprehensive reports. So here we go. This is again, these are cartoons. These are not real patients. They came from our testing side. There is no patient named Alice Red at Baystate Health. Nevertheless, this is a cancer report. There's no gross description, but I'll ask the pathologist to sort of skip over that because this was produced in our testing system. So here we go. Right up front, the first thing that anyone sees is this patient has breast cancer. So even like primary care, who might have access to the reports, doesn't need to sort of dig into page 2 or 3 to figure out what's going out. Right up front, breast cancer, invasive carcinoma. The next thing is what we call the main tumor characteristics. We've divided them up with modifications from mTuitive into sort of the primary tumor characteristics and then something called additional tumor features. That was a request on the part of our breast surgeons because they want to focus more on the primary features, not so much on the additional tumor features. Here's the typical margins, regional lymph nodes. But what we were able to add in our reports is something called best tumor block. That's this last item down here. That's because in a week, in a month, in a year, in 3 years, there might be some additional testing that needs to be done on the case, maybe advanced molecular testing. Now the pathologist can just look at the report and say, oh, I'll pull block 1-4, and that's what we're going to use for the additional testing. Prior to that, the whole case has to be reviewed again, and the pathologist has to decide what is the best tumor block for testing. This single little additive, best tumor block, is predicted to save at our institution probably about 4 hours per week of pathologist time. And pathologists get paid a significant amount per hour. So just adding in something like best tumor block, a real time saver, more efficient for the pathologist. Oops, I think I jumped to the next case. Okay, one more example of what I'll call our comprehensive report. This one is a bit more complicated and we'll review it in some detail. So again, right up front, final diagnosis, everyone can tell this is thyroid and the patient has a carcinoma called papillary carcinoma. So this is a 5-part case, and I'll show you how we tucked in the 5 parts into one comprehensive report. Up front, we sort of describe part 1 and part 2, which is the right lobe and left lobe. And then under the tumor characteristics, we'll specify that tumor was, let's just say, in the right lobe. So how we incorporate the other parts is sort of illustrated in this next section called the regional lymph nodes. If we focus for a moment at the second half where it says number of nodes examined, you can see right there it says, right lateral level 3 lymph nodes, part 3, or right lateral level 4 lymph nodes, part 4, or again, right lateral level 5 happens to be part 5 in this case. For billing purposes, it's important that each single part is represented in the pathologist's final report. And so that's how we're able to tuck in the various parts into the single diagnostic report. Other features that we created was we tucked the immunohistochemical studies right under ancillary studies. The pathologist simply clicks performed and reported as follows. Then we have a repeated A, B, C, D section where we type in the what test it was, what the result was, an interpretation for the immunohistochemical studies. Again, you'll see this best tumor block section. If you happen to have a part of a case that's completely unrelated to the cancer, like in this case, some skin from the right neck, that can be tucked in under sort of just an additional part section. Another small programming thing is that whenever a pathologist does do immunohistochemical studies, automatically this disclaimer pops in. Previously, the pathologist had to actually go in and manually attach that to the report. So there's a lot of individual programming that we've been able to do with mTuitive that just makes the pathologist's time more efficient. So fundamentally, I think the reports that we issue are just about the easiest to read. That is from the audience that we serve, which again are our surgeons and oncologists. They're comprehensive. There is no risk of transcription or transposition error. And basically, we're very pleased of the kind of reports we're able to do working with mTuitive and also with our vendor, Cerner, because we have Cerner CoPath. So between the two of them, I suppose we're fairly pleased. We've been using these modified protocols now for about 3 months. So thank you very much for your time. And as I said, unfortunately, I have to depart in just a few minutes. So I'll sign off shortly. And with that said, I will stop sharing my screen. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Duke. So I think that now we can take some questions.
Does the CAP later check the automatic generated PTNM or authorize the final release after your adjustments, or is that done locally?
Right, I guess kind of both. If I'm understanding the question correctly, this person is asking if after we do the automatic staging calculations and we test and validate those, do those then go to the CAP? Does the CAP look at them or authorize them in any way? And the answer to that question is no. The CAP does not authorize our automatic staging calculations.
I was going to say, thanks, Lilli. I kind of figured that was more of a question about the auto staging more than it was from the CAP.
Are you running authorized pathology reports through the new version automatically? As in, is it based on real reports or is it more like an automatic test?
What I will say is it's not based on real reports. We're not using real data, but essentially what we're doing, and we actually have a tool within our authoring program that helps us do it, is to generate every possible combination that a user might enter in order to generate a stage. So we only look at the questions that actually impact staging, but essentially, we're looking at the questions that impact staging. And we generate every possible combination of answers. And then our subject matter experts will assign a stage to each of those combinations. And so basically, we were trying to simulate every possible real world use case that we can. And of course, that gets a little bit tricky with numbers because we can't test every number. So we choose a representative sample that will make sure that it hits the low end and high end of each number range that may be used in an AJCC staging criteria. But we do not use real data in our testing process, as in like real report data or patient data.
Is it possible to see metrics of how many override automatic calculations were done, by either the type of checklist or the users, or is there a way for someone to look at that?
That is a really great question, and I will actually have to reach out to our development team and get back to you and let you know if we can run a query like that. But that is a really interesting point.
How do pathologists cope with changes in between releases when T&M changes or the blue books in quotes?
One way to always handle those, there is an open comments field at the end of the checklist that allows a user to write anything they want to for a checklist. So if there's something that's not currently in the user version that you're currently using that needs to be there, you could use the comments field. That's where some people put those odd entities into. On the other hand, though, the CAP tries to stay up with the updates. So the WHO and the AJCC, when staging those things, they changed. We are very quick to release our changes to match theirs. It's actually part of our contracts with them. So
to speak to that from an mTuitive perspective, I know that, with, updates, especially after the initial AJCC, like 8th edition manual comes out, can be sometimes difficult for pathologists to keep up with, to know that they have, for example, like the most recent errata. So that is something that we at mTuitive pay a lot of attention to. And we always stay up to date on anything that is changed about the staging criteria or anything in the AJCC staging manual. And we make sure that we reflect that in our staging calculations. And I can actually think of, an actual situation where that has helped avoid a potential error in staging calculations that would have impacted patient care.
Is it possible to combine more protocols in one pathology report?
I think if people have questions about, what can be done with the final pathology report and the final output, I would actually recommend that they would email support@mtuitive.com, just because our support team are really the experts of knowing, LIS specific differences and, how pathology reports end up being structured in each LIS. And actually, our support team is getting back to me right now in the chat, and they're saying the answer is yes.
I was going to say, from a CAP perspective, it's definitely done, because you have cases where you might have a bladder cancer and a prostate submitted in the same specimen, so you have to submit 2 synoptics off of that. From a content standpoint, it's encouraged.
Is best tumor block part of all mTuitive synoptic worksheets? I don't remember seeing that before. And actually, Dr. Duke responded with that they added it to our resection specimens via modifying the protocols by working with mTuitive. So as I see that, if that's something you're interested in, as you find it very useful, please reach out. As Lilli pointed out, just email support@mtuitive.com. And that's something we can discuss and see how we can modify your worksheets.
I would love to know if something like that is, if you think that would be helpful to you and your facility, because maybe in the future, we're interested in, should that be something that mTuitive adds to, for example, all resection checklists across the board for everybody? If that is something that could save people a lot of time down the line, as Dr. Duke was saying.
Is it necessary for individual sites to test each synoptic report in their system after loaded in test before moving to live?
It is up to the site, what their own internal sort of testing process and how they would like to deal with publishing checklists. Some people publish straight to test, or some people publish to test, some people publish straight to live, and it's really up to the facility in terms of what their process is for QA, and if they would like to go through the checklists and take a look at them before publishing them to their live environment.
Thank you again. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colin Murphy. And
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, everybody, who has joined today and participated. Thank you also for letting me interrupt a little bit. We've covered a lot of ground today, and we still have a little ways to go. So I won't take up too much time. Give everybody a little bit of break before we dive into the next session. But I did want to take a minute to say a few thank yous. First and foremost, I want to thank Dr. Duke and Eric Daley for participating today. It's critical for us in these events that we present information from both our users' point of view, from our partners' point of view, and from our own point of view. And we could not do that without presenters volunteering their time to help us. So Dr. Duke and Eric, thank you very much. Also wanted to extend that thank you to the CAP. We've been working with the CAP now for 18 years, cultivating a relationship to really further align our objectives and improve diagnostics and translational medicine in pathology, looking to capture and use that discrete data. Their ongoing commitment to this process has been absolutely imperative, and it makes me proud to work with a group that's having such a profound impact on patient care. So I really appreciate that we have this shared vision. So thank you, CAP. Also, thank you to our vendor partners. The workflow that we have to consider when we're entering any hospital or any laboratory is extremely important. We're providing a platform that pathologists are going to use and pathology departments are going to use to create their reports. We need it to be very smooth, and without the partnership that partnerships we have and the work that we've done with all of our vendor partners, whether that be the LIS vendors, the digital pathology vendors, EHR vendors, any consumers of the discrete data that's being generated, it's again imperative that we have those relationships in order to ensure that smooth workflow. And I know we've got some of them here on the phone today, so thank you guys. And last but not least, thank you to our customers. We're very passionate about the benefits of structured data and what it can bring to healthcare. We're really forever grateful that you guys share that vision, or else we wouldn't be here. So one last, I guess, couple of other minor announcements, and then I'll let everybody take a quick break before we get started at 3:30. We do have a number of exciting developments going on at mTuitive. We're hiring new employees, and we've added to our staff in the last few months. And some of these staff that we have added are going to be working on new projects that we're recruiting customers to participate in. If there are customers out there that are interested in doing something with the structured data, with the discrete data that's being captured, and use your imagination to what you would want to do, please reach out to us. I'll piggyback on the last session talking about adding information to the checklists, like the best tumor block question. That's a great example of how we can improve the data that's being captured so that we can use it downstream. Please let us know. Reach out to Julie. We're very interested in any project that you guys might want to participate in. One of those areas that we have been working on for all of 2021 and actually many years before that, but it started in the beginning of 2021, or ramped up in the beginning of 2021 when we licensed protocols from the American College of Surgeons, and that's in surgical synoptic reporting. So most of you on the phone probably know us as pathology reporting providers, but we've been doing this in surgery for about 10 years as well. And here in the United States, the Commission on Cancer has required the use of synoptic reporting for surgical protocols as well, and that's those requirements are kicking in as early as next year. We've been working on we partnered with the American College of Surgeons and have been deploying working with their content, deploying their content now for 2021, and there's going to be more content released in January of 2022. And luckily, I'm the guy that gets to make the announcement to welcome our newest customers to mTuitive, Genesis Healthcare out of Iowa and Illinois, and Salinas Valley out in California. just signed this week. So we've got our newest customers that have joined us as surgical synoptic reporting customers and partners, and we wanted to extend that welcome to you. This timing would have it that it happened just before our virtual event, so that's great news. And if you are sticking around for the 3:30 presentation, Eric Nowicki and Rob Dean will give you a lot more details on exactly what those standards are and how we're approaching that solution. So yeah, with that, I'll hand it back over to Julie and look forward to the 3:30 presentation. If anybody has any feedback for us, for our team, or any questions for me, please feel free to reach out. Julie's a great contact for you. And with that, I'll hand over to Julie. Thanks all. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Colin. And thank you to Dr. Duke, Eric, and Lilli